Hey everyone, we're going to give everybody another minute or so to hop on and then we'll get started. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kelsey Helsper, and I'm here today to talk to you about strategies for successful outings in the community. So there's some different ways that we can communicate tonight. So participation is strongly encouraged and can help you relate to the content and apply it to your daily life. So here are your communication options during this training. So at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see the chat button, a raised hand feature, and a Q&A. I will say with practice, we have had the most success with using the chat feature. It's easy for me to see as I'm presenting. So if that's the easiest option for you guys, that works best for me. But those other options are available to you if you should want to use them. But during this presentation, we'll pause throughout to share some examples. You're also encouraged to ask questions that relate to the topic that we're discussing tonight. And you can do both of those things by using the chat at the bottom of your screen. Also, one more thing to note is that at the bottom, you can see as you're typing in the chat that you can respond to just the panelists, which that would just be me, or the panelists and other attendees. So that would be anybody attending this presentation. Okay, so our objectives for this training tonight are to identify some proactive ways to set you and your child up for success in the community, to understand how and when to use reinforcement, identify ways to handle challenging behavior in the community, identify why challenging behavior might be occurring in the community, and to identify who to contact for help with community outings for your child. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a poll, and you should see that pop up on your screen as soon as I hit the button. So it should be on your screen now if you don't mind just hitting which one applies to you. Awesome, guys. Thanks for participating. So it looks like a lot of you have no previous ABA experience, or some of you have just a little bit. But either way, you are likely attending this webinar because you've had some complications with community outings with your child. So I'd love to be able to talk through some of those with you and figure out a way to help. So the benefits of community outings. So we want to help your child be as successful as possible in the community. So some of the benefits of doing community outings with your child include generalization of skills we are teaching. So that means if they're learning to do something in the center, we want to make sure that they can do it somewhere else. So in the community, at the park, at the store, wherever that skill may be applicable. It's also good for family bonding. So no more divide and conquer. I'm a parent myself, so my husband and I definitely practice dividing and conquering, but it is nice to get that quality family time all together and be able to work on that together as well. It presents new learning opportunities to your child. And it gives them that exposure that had they been, at home, not going to the store, they wouldn't have had that exposure. You're also able to participate in your community as a family. So, going to church, the store, the restaurant, recreational activities, whatever is important to you and your family, which right now may be hard to judge because it's likely that you're not really getting many opportunities to go out in the community like you may have been used to before. But, whatever is important to you and your family and whatever you would like your child to be able to do, they won't be able to do that without practice. So, even if it's overwhelming at first, we're going to talk about how to make it easier over time. So, first, before we get started diving into the content, I would love for us to share some examples. So, if you don't mind, in the chat, select one community outing that your child struggles with and why, and post it in the chat. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to write them down. And I'll just go ahead and start reading some of these while you guys are typing them out, just so you guys can get an idea of what other people might be struggling with. So, someone said restaurants, and their child likes to run around. That can be tricky. Going into a store that has toys. Yeah, those can be really preferred. Church likes to hear loud voice and echo. Always start in the pews, but we have a good cry room when he gets to be too much. Um, yeah, those are all really common places too that I'm sure you guys go to frequently. So working on that stuff is going to be important. Parties is another good one. So being overstimulated, too many people, yeah, that can definitely be hard if you are trying to go to a birthday party or an outing with lots of people gathering. All right. Well, we're going to continue talking about this. You guys can feel free to continue writing some stuff down in the chat, and I'll just try to reference it throughout the presentation as we go. So, first, we're going to talk about some proactive strategies. So, before the outing, we need to make sure all basic needs are met before heading out. So, it can sometimes be easy to think about our own schedules as we go through our days, but sometimes we can forget about our child's schedule. And it's equally as important to make sure that we don't go right before a nap time or before they've had a chance to have a snack or lunch. Those things are important. So, also remember to bring a water bottle and a snack with you on the outings if you think that that might be necessary or they might need that. So you can also ask your child's behavior analyst to accompany you to a place that has traditionally been difficult. So, for some of you who have not started services yet, that may be your interim care behavior analyst, or that could be, the ACL at your center. And they likely, before you start services, wouldn't be accompanying you on those outings, but they could at least give you some strategies that might be individualized to your child. But if in-person meetings and interactions are not feasible right now during these times, you're also able to schedule a meeting via Zoom. So just to talk about it maybe before you go or whatever you need. Okay, so also before the outing, it's really important to have a plan. So you want to make a plan before the outing. So you can ask yourself things like, what is your goal? Are you working on going to a new place? Are you tolerating a different routine? Let's say you're going into the same store, but maybe you're walking through a different entrance of the store, or maybe your child is used to sitting in the cart at the grocery store and you're going to try to have them not sit in the cart. Are you working to reduce challenging behavior in a familiar place? And what you want to work on will change your plan. So, for example, if you're working on going to a whole new place and your child really struggled with that the first time that you tried, you may get to the door before you decide to head home, and that's okay. It's important to keep your goals small and work up to the big goals so that your child is able to contact success on these outings. We want to really start small and really make them know that it's not as overwhelming as they feel like it is. So let's work through some examples. So, some examples of some good goals could be staying seated in the cart for 5 minutes at the grocery store. So, maybe you've never worked on this before and it's really, really tricky for them. So, maybe you don't tackle the whole store all at once. Maybe you do it in a minute increment or 5 minute increment. Another one could be walking into a restaurant, sitting down for a few minutes, and then leaving. So, somebody did mention restaurant as being a really tricky one, and liking to get up and run around. So, maybe your child's not able to tolerate sitting for that duration of time just yet. But if you start small and work up to that big long time, it can be a lot easier because they are able to contact that success multiple times and with practice to work up to that big goal. Another good goal to target would be sitting down to read one book at the library. So, if the library is really difficult, maybe they have trouble being quiet or they have trouble sitting down for that whole time. Again, start small. Pick one book or pick to sit, go into the first room that you see, sit down for a minute, and then leave again. It may seem, like too small of a goal at first, but as your child contacts more success, you'll be able to work up that goal. Another one could be standing in line at the concession stand. So maybe you target standing in line somewhere outside where it's not going to be as important that they're quiet, or maybe you pick a line that has less amount of people. Um, so, whatever your goal may be, it's going to be individualized for your child, and it's going to be something that hopefully on the first attempt, they are able to contact some success so that they get that practice and they're able to go back in the next time and do something slightly more difficult. So, desensitizing. So, does the environment you are taking your child into have elements that are aversive to him or her? So, one of you mentioned parties, that it's overstimulating, too many people, loud noises. That situation is obviously aversive to your child. So, that is going to be really difficult to even be in that environment because that's something that you're not going to have any control over. Um, so something to think about here is maybe if you're working up to that point, maybe you can start by having just 2 or 3 people in the room at a time. And then maybe you work up to 5 or 6 people. And then you can gradually work up to where they're more comfortable with that many people in the room at the same time. Does your child have to do something special in this location that he or she does not have to do at home? So, routines and expectations can be different from place to place, and your child may really tune into stuff like that. So, they may understand that the way that they have to behave somewhere else is different than the way that they have to behave at home or at the center or somewhere where they're more comfortable. So, try to tune into some of that stuff that may be keeping them from wanting to be in that location. And once we can identify those things, then we're able to set a goal and work through it. Here are some examples of some things that might require some desensitization. So, right now, in the times that we're in, I'm sure it has been difficult for some of you to get your child to wear a mask. So, we have to desensitize something like that. So, one way we may do that is saying, okay, I'm going to set a timer for 30 seconds. We're going to wear the mask for 30 seconds. Then we get to take it off. And then we can gradually build that time. Something else is loud echoing sound. So, like I mentioned in the example of going to a party, you could do the same thing for other environments. So, tune into what in that environment is difficult for your child. So, if it is really loud sounds, start with a really muted sound and then increase the volume of that sound over time so that they're able to get used to that sound instead of it just being abrupt and loud for them. Another thing could be bright lights. So, in a similar fashion, you could start by dimming the lights and then gradually increase the brightness, or riding in a cart or stroller at the store or maybe at the park. So, if any of these elements are affecting your child's ability to tolerate that environment, you can again reach out to your behavior analyst for specific ideas on how to work on desensitization for your child specifically. Another thing you can do is use visual support. So, these can be as detailed or as basic as you need them to be. And we're going to talk through some of the details that are displayed here. And then we can talk about some ways that you can modify them. So, the first icon that you see on the left is a picture of a first then board. And this could tell your child that first he needs to sit quietly in the cart and then he can have a snack or whatever you decide is going to be the reinforcer for your child, which we'll talk about in a minute. The second visual is a series of pictures displaying the exact steps that you will take during the outing. So, this can help prepare your child for what's to come next. And it can also be a great way to show them how much longer they have until the task is over. So, something you could do with a visual like this is after you complete a step of it, you could remove that icon so they know that step is complete. And that's just a really great way to show them how much they've done and how much is left. The third visual is a timer. So, this can also be a great way to show your child how much time is left during the activity. And like I said, you could set it to whatever amount of time that you feel like is appropriate for your child. And lastly, you could create a social story, which is the last visual here on the right. And the social story could describe all the things that happen at the grocery store or wherever you're going that day. So you can read this to them before the outing, and it can also help prepare your child for what's to come or the elements of the outing that you may not have control over. Um, so, with these visuals, obviously, you wouldn't have to create these alone. Again, your BA is here to help. And if you think that one of these visuals would be really great for your child when you're going on outings, then just reach out to them and they'd be happy to create some of these materials for you. Another thing you could do is you could even just use a whiteboard or a piece of paper, anything that you have on hand with you. And you could jot down tally marks or stars or kind of give them a visual of the things that they're doing really well. So let's say they hop into the cart with no protest or no challenging behavior, and you give them a little smiley face on a piece of paper to show them that they did something well. So these can be as individualized as they need to be. They can be simple, they can be longer, whatever you feel like is appropriate for your child. Okay, so let's talk through some reinforcers. So, if you haven't heard this term before, a reinforcer is really a reward that your child is getting for doing something good or doing something that you would like them to do. So, these can be anything and they're going to be individualized to your child, but the most important thing is to make sure that they are preferred to your child and especially preferred in that moment. We don't like to have to guess what's going to be reinforcing because you could be stuck in a situation where you're at the store and you just grabbed a couple items that they may or may not like. And then once you get to the store, they don't really want those items. So you're not able to use them as a reinforcer. So you want to make sure that they are something preferred. But other than that, they're pretty open ended. So you want to have these items that may help them cope. So if your child is having trouble and needs some desensitization for that environment, you could bring sensory items for them. So let's say loud noises are really bothersome to them. You could give them a pair of headphones, or you could teach them to cover their ears, or anything like that that's gonna help aid in that. You could also bring some edible reinforcers like some crackers or candy or whatever your child loves. Um, or you could bring some small little toys for them to have. But another important factor of using these as reinforcers and not just allowing your child to have them for the whole outing is you want to be able to control when they have them and when they don't have them. And you want to be able to use these items as a reinforcer for good, desirable behavior rather than allowing them to have them after they've engaged in challenging behavior, something you're not looking for them to do. So, the reason why like small edibles or small toys are desirable here is because you can have control of those things and you can have control of how much access they're getting to that thing, especially with edibles. Those you give them to them and they eat them, so then they're gone and then they're looking to you for more, so you have all the control in that situation, and that helps you to be able to control what behaviors you want to see. So let's talk a little bit about reinforcement versus bribery. So, reinforcement is provided after a positive behavior happens, like we talked about. And bribery is offering the child something to stop once the problem behavior has already started. So, we do not want to give them these reinforcers just to get them to calm down. We want to only be giving them these reinforcers when they've done something to earn that. So that may mean that if we didn't provide reinforcement quickly enough, or they didn't do something right away that allowed us to give them the reinforcer, then we might just have to wait them out for a little bit until they do engage in a desirable behavior. But it's important to then, once they do engage in something desirable, reinforce that behavior right away so that they make sure that they understand why they're contacting that thing. And then they're more likely to change their behavior in the future because that behavior, that positive behavior, is what got them what they wanted. So, an example of bribery would be if you stop screaming, we'll go get a new toy. So, we want to avoid statements like that because, again, we're reinforcing the challenging behavior instead of reinforcing something positive or desirable that we want to see. So, the main goal is to avoid reinforcing challenging behaviors. So, if the challenging behavior has already happened, do not offer or provide reinforcement and instead focus on what you want their behavior to look like instead. So, we like to refer to these as replacement behaviors. So, if they're doing something you don't want them to do, what could they be doing that you would like them to be doing? So, an example of this would be, remember, when you have a quiet voice in the store, you can get your M&Ms. And M's. And then once they start to have a quiet voice, that's when they can get an M&M. You also want to keep your child engaged while you're at the store. So engage your child in the outing and give them a job even as you're walking through the store. And it can be something completely basic, like having them put items into the cart for you. Maybe you grab them off the shelf and then they put them in. You could have them wave or say hi to people as you pass them. You could give them a list. Maybe it's your real shopping list, or maybe it's just a made up list that you give to them, but you could have them check things off the list for you. You could also play I Spy and Find things throughout the store, label things as you see them together. Um, or if you're at the park and maybe they're used to a routine at the park, they only play with a certain few items and you want to try to get them to play on something new. You can try a new slide or a new swing at the playground. Just anything to keep them engaged and engaged with you as well throughout the outing. So if your child is not at this point yet, that's totally okay. You can bring an activity or item that they can engage with while they're at the store. We're going to talk about this in a minute, but we would prefer that those items avoid any technology aspects, and we'll talk about why in a second. But here are some good examples of some items that you could bring for them. Um, if they're really into sensory things like a squishy ball, you could bring that for them to squeeze, and it could give them that sensory input throughout the outing. You could do like a pin art toy or just really anything small that they can hold and be doing with their hands. There are those Water Wow activity books. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of those, but basically the pin is just water. So it's not markers or crayons, but the water then makes the page turn different colors. So that would be something good that they could do that wouldn't be messy. Um, they make those locks and latches toys that can kind of keep their hands busy too, or a small snack like we talked about Cheerios, crackers, fruit snacks, anything that your child prefers that you can have full control over. But going back to the technology component, so there are many reasons why we recommend avoiding the use of technology items for the community. Since the technology items typically get them sucked into whatever they're watching or listening to, they're tuning out the environment that they're in and they're only tuning in to their electronic device. So that doesn't give them the best practice in dealing with the environment or getting adapted to the environment because they're focused on something else and they're really just able to tune that out rather than work on tolerating it or getting better in that environment. So it also limits their ability to engage in social interactions and can be very difficult for you to remove. So, like we talked about with reinforcers before, we really want to make sure that you are in control of that reinforcer. And it's likely that a technology item is pretty preferred to your child, and they may have a hard time giving that item back to you. So, by using the technology item and having to remove it because we're only wanting to provide that for positive, desirable behaviors, it can be really a battle of removal if they're not able to tolerate you removing that item so that you can work on another skill. And if your child currently relies heavily on technology, especially during a community outing, it's okay to work up to the point where you're not using it at all. If that is something that you've relied on pretty heavily up until this point, obviously taking it away would be a really huge transition for them. So we don't want that transition to be something that holds you guys back from being successful in the outing. So we want to make sure that that transition away from the iPad or technology item is successful and gradual too. So to start the transition away from that, if that is something that you've been relying on up until this point, is try giving yourself a goal of not using the iPad or device for the last 5 minutes of the outing. So they can have it the full time except for the last 5 minutes. Or you could do the first 5 minutes and then they get it. But once your child learns to tolerate that, you can just continue to increase the amount of time that they're without it um, until they're able to tolerate it fully. So you could also limit to only using it as a reinforcer once they've worked on that targeted skill. So, like I said before, if you think removing it is going to be a huge issue, maybe you avoid approaching it that way at first. But there are multiple ways that you could work on that. So, again, your behavior analyst is going to know specifically what might be the best approach for your child if you're having a hard time identifying that. So reach out to them with any child specific questions that you may have. So now let's talk about responding to challenging behavior. So when challenging behavior occurs, The most important thing to do is to breathe. You can get through this. You can handle it. It will be okay. So just, say that mantra over and over again to yourself, if you need to in the store, on your outing, wherever you are. It is going to be okay. It may be tough in the beginning, but the more practice your child has, the better it's going to be in the future. So just keep your eye on the goal and try to breathe and get through it. Um, it's also important to think about the function of your child's behavior in that very moment. So we talk about the functions of behavior in 4 different functions. So there's access. So do they want an item or an activity? Let's say you remove something from them and they want it back. That would also be access. Are they trying to escape something? So, do they want to get away from the situation? For some of you who mentioned things like loud noises, being around a lot of people, that's a situation they're trying to escape. So, they're going to do whatever it takes to get them out of that situation. They may just want your attention. So, do they want your attention on them? Do they want the attention of other people? When they scream or kick or throw something, are they looking at you for your reaction, or are they looking to others for their reaction? It could be attention maintained. Or the last option could be that it's sensory maintained. So, are they getting preferred sensory input from the behavior? That is likely something like hand flapping, or it could be for the person who used the example of church, hearing that loud echo could just be a sensory input that they are seeking in that moment. Um, and I will say, if it is a sensory component, it can be really difficult to control because obviously they're getting that reinforcement from within and it doesn't have to do with you or anything else in the environment. So those can be a little trickier. We have to get a little more creative with how to break that cycle and work on that, but it can still be done and it can still be worked on as well. So we're going to talk about each of the functions now. So access maintained behavior. So make sure your child knows when they will get access. Like we talked about with the visuals, those can be a really great way to let them know when their reinforcement is coming. So the first then board that we talked about, a visual schedule with the item that they want at the end, or using a timer. Any of those would be great options if they are trying to access something and they might need a little visual support. You also want to make sure that you're limiting any free access to things you will have to take away from them. So have them ride in the cart if that's age appropriate, so that they're not going and grabbing, toys off the shelves or whatever. You could also hold their hand or give them something to hold to prevent their grabbing as well. You could keep them occupied by singing songs together, especially if you're at the grocery store in a cart or somewhere where you can have them with you at all times. So, you want to make sure that you're in control of their reinforcement and the things that they like, and their attention is on you and the goal as well, so that they're not just looking for ways to access other things. You also want to make sure to keep it short and simple. So start by going to one section of a store or going to get one item. So, for an example, at the grocery store, you could start with just going to the produce section of the grocery store, or an area that won't have a lot of appealing items, like maybe the cracker or the snack aisles. Um, and then, if they're able to walk through the whole produce section with you, then you can provide them with their reinforcement before you go into those highly tempting aisles. Um, and then you're going to reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. So give them lots of verbal praise, and try to make that praise behavior specific. So let's say they kept their hands in the cart the whole time when usually they're trying to grab for the things on the shelves. make sure you tell them, hey, great job keeping your hands in the cart. I'm so proud of you. I love how your hands were in your lap, things like that. Um, you can also give them other reinforcers, like we talked about, like those edible reinforcers or the small toys or sensory items. And then if challenging behavior occurs, make sure it's not followed by the item they want access to. So if you are able to help them calm, then great, keep going with whatever you were doing. And if not, it is okay to have to leave the environment. The most important thing is that they don't get access to the thing that they wanted out of engaging in challenging behavior, because the next time you go to that place, the fact that they got access before is going to make them try to do that same thing to get access again. So, if you feel comfortable enough to stay in that environment and work through that challenging behavior, then absolutely do so. But if it gets to a point where safety is compromised or you are not feeling comfortable, it's okay to just up and leave the outing and work on it next time. Just try to keep your focus on them not getting access to the reinforcement. And then if you cannot grant access to the item, so let's say they're reaching for a toy that another child has in their cart, or something that you're just not able to provide to them, you can give them some choices of other items that they are able to have. So let's say you're at the park and somebody is on their favorite swing, the only swing that they ever want to be on. So you say, hey, that swing's not available, but you can have this swing or we can go slide. Giving them choices will help them have some control of what choice they select. So choices can be a really powerful tool here. You can also try to divert their attention to another area or location that, maybe it's out of sight, out of mind that needs to happen for your child, and that's okay. Another thing we could do is build in a visual. So you could have your behavior analyst create an X visual card for you, or maybe it's the word no, or whatever you think your child would respond to. But if, let's say, they're grabbing for a lot of things that they can't have a lot of the time whenever you are out in the community, you can use that X or any visual that you decide to show them what's off limits and what's available. So several different things that you can try if it's access maintained. Okay, if it's escape maintained behavior, so we want to talk about shaping the behavior. So we're going to work toward a goal, but making sure that we start really small. And you want to make sure too, if it's a task that's long or it has a lot of steps, you want to reinforce each successful step toward that goal. Because like we mentioned before, the whole task may be too lofty of a goal to start with. So again, let your child know when they can be all done. That can be really powerful and a great way for them to be able to visualize what they're able to get out of and when that time is coming. You can take a backup person with you if possible as well. Your behavior analyst, like I said, can accompany you to these outings, or maybe you just make sure, your husband or wife or grandma or somebody else is present to kind of help manage if the challenging behavior is too severe. Um, Especially if it is a must-do situation, let's say like a dentist or the doctor or something that they really don't get much exposure to frequently. So having an extra set of hands can really be helpful in those situations. And then again, and this will go for any of the functions of behavior, but if the challenging behavior escalates and it becomes too much for you to handle, or you are worried about the safety of you or someone else or your child, it's okay to leave. And it's okay to say, we've just got to try again another time. But what you want to do before leaving is try to reinforce the closest to calm that you can get. So If their function is escaping that situation, obviously by removing them from that environment or that situation, they are gaining access to escaping that behavior, or escaping that environment. So they are getting reinforced for that challenging behavior. So if you're able to wait them out until they are able to be slightly more calm, let's say um, they're kicking and screaming and flopping on the floor, but you're able to get them to stand up and walk out with you while they're still crying and screaming, rather than having to physically carry them out. That would be a better alternative than you know, just taking them at their highest escalation point. But you're going to leave the immediate area and work on calming down. And then you can leave entirely. So, again, if it is escape that they're seeking out of this, you just want to make sure that they're not engaging in challenging behavior and then getting to leave completely. Maybe you think that they're in an unsafe like area of the store, or maybe they're around a lot of people. So let's say you work on getting them to a quieter area or somewhere with less people, and then you feel okay to work through the challenging behavior there rather than just leaving the store completely. That will help make sure that they are not able to escape it for engaging in that challenging behavior and breaking that cycle a little bit. And then sometimes we have to abandon ship, especially if safety is compromised, and that's okay. If you do realize, I can't do this, we have to leave the store completely. Uh, my child's not safe or other people aren't safe. That's okay. Just know that next time you may have to do a little bit more prep work, or you may have to modify the goal a little bit, because it may have just been too much for your child to handle, and that's okay. The most important thing is that you're learning from the experience and making modifications to the next one, and not just giving up and letting them get out of that situation completely forever. And again, practice, practice, practice. Keep going back. Your child can do this, and so can you. So don't be afraid to reach out again to your BA for help with this, because we want to make sure that you can make it through the store or make it to church or go to the park and leave without challenging behavior. We want to make sure we help you with that, because those are significant parts of your lives, and we don't want you to have to make modifications to that forever. Okay, so let's talk about attention maintain behavior. So if it's attention maintain, you want to make sure to provide lots of non-contingent attention throughout your outing. And what non-contingent means is they are not required to do anything to get your attention. So you're just giving them lots of attention throughout the outing, and that's kind of keeping them from having to do anything inappropriate to gain your attention, because they already have it. Um, if it's attention maintain, it's also great to just narrate what you're doing. So, like I mentioned before, you can label things that you're seeing throughout the store. You can label people that you see. You can label colors, whatever seems appropriate on your outing. Just talking to them and providing them with that attention will help to reduce that challenging behavior. And again, a backup person can be really helpful with this, because you guys can take turns keeping your child occupied, especially if that outing is, like I mentioned, the doctor or the dentist or somewhere where for a period of time you are going to have your attention off of your child. And then if others attempt to provide attention to your child when it is inappropriate. So let's say they are engaging in attention seeking behavior by grabbing items off the shelf at a grocery store. And then let's say another customer, starts providing them with some verbal attention, or even begins looking at them and giving them that attention. It's okay to kindly ask them to stop or move on. And you could also, if that person is not listening to your directions, you could move your body in between your child and that person to make sure that you are decreasing their ability to see that person and access that other person's attention. And then also, if you have to move locations, that's okay too. You don't have to just stand there wherever, the people are present or the people are providing attention to your child. You can try to move to a different area that's quieter with less people to work through that instance. But again, like escape, you don't want to allow your child to escape the environment completely while engaging in challenging behavior. You don't want to allow your child to just access a ton of attention from other people or you for that um, challenging behavior. So even things like saying no or asking them to stop can sometimes be enough attention, if it is attention maintained, to fuel them to keep going. So the best thing to do is to ignore those things if you're able to. So don't provide vocal attention to it. Try to avoid making eye contact for those things. And then again, just try to get them to engage in a replacement behavior or something appropriate and focus more on that appropriate behavior than you are on the negative behavior. Okay, and lastly, sensory maintained behavior. So if your child seeks sensory input through challenging behavior, really, this is going to be really individualized to your client. So you want to ask your behavior analyst for some specific replacement behaviors to try that might be most appropriate for your child. But you can also consult with your child's behavior analyst. Their OT, if they have one, should have some great sensory stimulating activities you might be able to try or sensory specific items that your child might be able to use on the outing. But something else that you can try, as we talked about, non-contingent attention. So providing attention where they don't really have to do anything to get that. You could also provide some non-contingent access to sensory items on your outing. So you could just be giving them a lot of squeezes as they're sitting in the cart, giving them hugs, arm scratches, whatever is desirable or maybe what your child is trying to access. You can give them access to those things when they're not engaging in the challenging behavior. One thing I did want to note is I'm not exactly sure of the access that you have to these things during COVID times, but these are some outing ideas or some places that you can take your child to work on some sensory friendly things, especially if your child has a high aversion to specific environments. You can consider taking advantage of some of these sensory friendly outings. So Chuck E. Cheese does a sensory friendly Sunday. You can visit the website here to get more information on that. Also, some movie theaters do lights up, sounds down, where they modify the lighting in the movie theater. They make sure that it's quieter so your child can get more comfortable with the movie theater. And then there are plenty of other places, local places that do sensory friendly things like this as well. So you can reach out to your BA if this is something you're interested in getting more information about, or you can just search online as well for local businesses that might have autism or sensory friendly options. I'm going to go over this later in the presentation too, but you will also have access to this PowerPoint and this information after this presentation is over if you want access to this slide and this information. Okay, so let's talk through some specific outing examples. So going to the library, some things you could do for this, some proactive strategies. You could practice wearing a mask and following the direction to be quiet before you're in that environment. If you're making a plan, maybe let's say you select 3 books at the library, check out, and then leave. So to have a visual support for this, you could have a picture schedule with 3 different books, a picture of the checkout counter, and then maybe your child gets to cross each of those pictures off as you complete them. You could use any type of reinforcer, but for here, let's say they use Skittles and a favorite small toy. It's also really good to have multiple examples so that if your child is not interested in one of those items, you have a backup. And then in your plan, you want to make sure you understand what to reinforce. So here, the plan is to select 3 books at the library, check out and leave. And what you're gonna reinforce with those Skittles and that small toy are holding your hand, staying quiet, and keeping hands to self. So when challenging behavior does occur, or if it occurs, you can use some neutral prompting. So again, if it's attention seeking or any challenging behavior, really, we just want to try to maintain a neutral tone and make sure that we're not responding differently for challenging behavior than we are for their appropriate behavior. So you could model the behavior that you want them to be doing, like modeling your hands in your lap or hands down. You could put your finger over your mouth to show them that they need to be quiet. Um, you also want to provide lots of praise and reinforcement when your child is engaging in appropriate behavior. So you can be proactive about that. As you're walking, you can just be saying, "Hey, I like how you're holding my hand. Thanks for staying quiet." You can provide that praise while they're doing it and before they start to engage in any challenging behavior. And again, you're going to withhold reinforcement when challenging behavior is happening and only provide that reinforcement when appropriate behaviors are happening. Another one we've talked about is going to the grocery store. So let's say our goal here, before we go, we're going to practice wearing a mask and we're going to practice holding hands. Once we feel like we've got a good handle on both of those things, then we're going to make a plan to walk around just the produce section for 5 minutes holding hands, and then we're going to leave the store. So the visual support I'm going to use for this is a visual timer. And let's say when they try to pull their hand away from me, I just show them the timer again so that they don't let go of my hand. And then reinforcers, I'm going to use a squishy ball for them to hold in their hand as we walk. And then I'm also going to give them popcorn throughout as they're holding my hand and walking. And then I'm going to reinforce holding hands, keeping hands to self, and off of food items. So anytime that they are not reaching for food items and they're continuing to hold my hand, he or she can be eligible to have some popcorn and hold the squishy ball. But if challenging behavior does occur, I'm going to provide lots of praise and reinforcement when they're engaged in the appropriate behavior, provide hand squeezes for sensory input non-contingently just throughout the outing. You can provide neutral prompts again and redirect the challenging behavior. So if they start to reach for a food item, you can say hands down, or you can show them hands down by like patting your legs or doing something like that. And then you're going to withhold reinforcement when any challenging behavior happens. So if they happen to be holding the ball as they start to engage in challenging behavior, you're just going to gently remove the ball. You're going to get them to do something appropriate, and then you can give that back. So what I want to do here is share. So we talked about a lot of things, a lot of different strategies that you could try. So I want you to tell me, of all the strategies we've talked about tonight, list one or more in the chat that you plan on building into your next community outing. Or it can just be anything that you found helpful of these strategies. Great. Somebody said using positive reinforcement and avoiding bribery. That's great. Lowering expectations and using smaller goals. slow, gradual transitions for other things. Oh, perfect. So you guys use gradual transitions for other things. So using them for outings will be great too. That's awesome. Reinforcement, more accessible goals to set us up for success. Perfect. So yeah, these are all great things, and I love that you guys are motivated to start with a goal and start small. Um, Having those reinforcements and having things to set you up for success, so you're not just thinking on your toes, can be really really great tools to keep you calm and to keep your child calm. So um, again, more accessible goals to set us up for success. Perfect. Okay. Awesome, guys. Well, the key takeaways for this training are to always have a plan, reinforce and celebrate even the smallest things. So you don't have to tell them to do something good for them to already be doing something good. Make sure that you're reinforcing that and celebrating all the good things that they're doing, even that you may not have had to prompt. um, Reach out to your behavior analyst for support, or I'll say it again in another slide, but if you don't have a behavior analyst yet, your child's clinical director is a good person to reach out to for that. You want to prompt appropriate language and communication with peers when you can. Just really try to increase their exposure to social interactions. And then vary length, goal of your outing, location, and activity as much as you can. So you don't have to limit yourself to just one outing or one location. If they're doing a great job, give them that exposure in lots of different places. Just take it as an opportunity to practice. So, some questions you might have about webinars in general. So, will this webinar be recorded? Yes, the webinar is recorded, and you will be sent a link a few days after the webinar is completed. And you will also be able to access it on Bierman's YouTube channel. And can I have access to previous webinars? So, yes, all previous webinars are on Bierman's YouTube channel, and a link to this will be sent to you a few days after this webinar with the recording. And then for future webinars, if you are interested in attending any more, on March 3rd, we're doing an introduction to ABA and occupational therapy. On March 17th, we're doing a discussion on feeding for children with autism. April 7th, we're doing an introduction to ABA and occupational therapy again. And then April 21st, we're doing a play skills webinar that will talk about teaching your child appropriate play skills and how to develop them. You can also visit this link at any time to sign up for those. And then for questions, so before we open it up to all questions, again, who you'll go to. If you're a current ABA family, you're going to contact your child's BA. Interim care family can contact your interim care BA. If you're a waitlist family that's not in interim care, you can contact the clinical director of your location. And then if you have other questions or you don't have one of those contact people, you can always email info@biermanaba.com. But our presentation is now over, but I am available and here to answer any questions that you guys may want to talk about this topic. Thanks, guys, for all your participation. All right, guys, thanks for participating. I don't think there's any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and log off.